You like that? You love that? Yay! Yeah. This is Bubbles. He's just getting his daily massage. He just finished eating his sprouts. And in today's video, I wanted to show you how I sprout easily for my birds. I figured out a routine, how I can save time, and I wanted to share it with you. And Bubbles wants to show you too. Look at him, he's like, oh, he's all itchy because he's molting. Yes, and he really enjoys his sprouts. All right, so I'm going to show you how I do that. So first I start off with taking all my ingredients out that I have available at this time. I take them all out to see what I have. So I got like my beans and my seeds and my grains. And so I make sure I have these 3 ingredients to add into my sprout mix. So you can find these in like grocery stores, health food stores. I find I can find like a better deal, like the bigger bags, especially like when I found these mustard seeds. Usually I can only find a small container and they're like $8 or something. If I go to the ethnic stores, they have a lot of like seeds and grains and beans. And I just go from store to store to store, and then I remember where I bought them from and I go get them, because not every store, every grocery store will carry all these items. And if they do, sometimes it's very small and very expensive. So you just got to look around. Also, you can find them on Amazon. I will post my link down below from my Amazon store of all of these ingredients. You can go have a look there if you're looking for them. So practically almost any seed can sprout, but the variety is key, because normally these kind of seeds aren't even in your bird seed. So this is giving them variety, and they really love the buckwheat. So I just want to show you how I make it easier for myself, and hopefully it will help you. So the first thing that I do when I get all my ingredients out is I get my jar handy here. This is a spaghetti holder. You can see how tall it is. It's meant to store spaghetti in, but you can put anything in there you want. It's made out of glass. Has a nice fitting lid on here. So what I do is I put all my ingredients in there, and it will look like this. So I just put layers in. I didn't measure it. I just pour whatever I like in there. So you can see it's all layered up, and then of course I'm gonna have to like shake it up so I can disperse it all, all mix it up so they get a little bit of everything. All right, so this is what it looks like when it's all been shaken up. Everything's evenly dispersed. And what I do every day is before I use it, is I give it a good shake, because the smaller items will sink to the bottom. So I just want everything, to be even, and so they can get a good choice of food. So what I do is I just leave that on my counter. 2 of them actually. I leave 2 of them there so that they're ready to go. Instead of grabbing every package and filling up a little bit of each thing, it's all ready to go. So sprouting involves soaking seeds overnight, or for around 8 to 10 hours. You can do it overnight or during the day, and then you drain them. Now place them into sprouting jars and continue to rinse them several times a day until they start to sprout, which is usually around 48 hours. So there's a lot of sprouting, containers you can use. You don't really have to buy, the special jars. This is an easy sprouter, which comes in handy. It's a really nice one. I have a video about that one. And then there's these sprouting jars with a special lid for rinsing. And then you can just use any kind of bowl and one of these strainers. And that's the easiest to do. You don't have to go and buy these containers, because usually you have one of these in your home, hopefully. If not, they're pretty cheap to buy. And you have bowls or containers. So what I'm using lately, I'm using this to sprout, and I'm using this. I don't really use this too often. So I am going to be using this to start. What I do is I get my empty jar here, and I just put enough sprouts that I will be using. I have a lot of birds, so it really depends. I mean, if you only have about 1 or 2 birds, you're just going to put a little bit in there. So I like to put in enough for all my birds, and usually they last around, I would say, 4 or 5 days. So it just depends, but for this video purpose, I'm just going to use that much. All right, so what I do now is I fill up the container with cold water, and I will stir it around. Now, sometimes the beans and the seeds, they can be dusty. So what I do is I stir it around a few times just to get all the dust up. And then, you know, see the water, how it's cloudy? What I do is I just do this a few times. I empty it out and I refill it as many times as it takes to make the water clear. Sometimes I won't even look. I'll just kind of dump it. You know, that's twice. Three times. And then I'll just kind of look. I like to get them like really clean. I'm going to put a little bit more water than the seeds because they will expand. And it doesn't look too bad. It's just cold like on the outside, so it's pretty clear, I believe. I might change it a few more times. So if you don't have a jar like that and you just have a bowl, you want to put your seeds in here, you know, run them under the water and then rinse them through this. It's very simple. Just rinse, rinse, rinse. It's actually kind of easier because you can rinse them really well with the strainer here. So that's all you really need to do if you don't have a jar like this. So I think I'm just going to rinse it a few more times just to be on the safe side. And I like everything to be nice and clean. You don't want them to be soaking in, like, you know, dirty water, dirty, dusty water. You want to keep your seeds and grains and beans as clean as you can. So if I do one more final rinse in, and I'll make sure like all the water is out, because before I just rinse them kind of fast. So if I get all the water out, and then all the dirty water will leave. So now it'll probably be okay, I assume. Sometimes they do it like 10, 15 times. Oh, there. That's looking a lot better. Just the seeds are kind of floating around. That's just moisture. So now I just let it sit like this overnight or for 8 to 10 hours. And I usually place it right in front of my sprouting mixes so I don't forget. So we'll see what it looks like after 10 hours. It's the next morning and you can see that the sprouts have absorbed most of the water. So now I have to drain them. So I drained all the water out, and what I do now is to rinse the sprouts, but I don't keep them in this jar anymore. I use my little strainer here. So I'm going to put them in the strainer and rinse them really, really well. And the reason I'm using a strainer is because it's bigger than the jar. I mean, I could use a jar if I wanted to, if there weren't so many sprouts. Because there are so many sprouts, I like to spread them out more so that they have a chance to, you know, sprout and not just be piled up on top of each other. And that's quite a bit of sprouts. Look how much there are. When you put in, you know, I put in a little bit, but it turned out to be so much because they're swollen. See that? So I do have a bigger strainer that I can move them to, you know, if needed. So what I do is I just rinse and I just you know, shake it around just to make sure they're all rinsed. You can use a grapeseed extract or apple cider vinegar to your rinses. You just rinse them in that. That just prevents them from being moldy, growing mold or any kind of fungus. So you really want to give them a good rinse. I'll turn that up higher. So the purpose of rinsing is you want to get, you know, all the old water off and to keep them clean. You don't want to give them a chance to grow any, you know, mold or fungus. And they need to be rinsed about 3 times a day. If your house is really dry and warm and it's very hot out, you might want to rinse it often. The goal is not to let them dry out and not to let them, you know, sit in standing water. So that's why you use this like a strainer. They have to, you know, drip dry. Just do not let them dry out. If they dry out, they probably won't sprout. So you want to do this like 2 or 3 times a day. And so this is the next day after I let them soak. And this is how I just store my sprouts after I've rinsed them and, you know, shaken out the water. There'll still be some little bit of drips. So you don't want the strainer to hit the bottom of the bowl. This one doesn't. And I just basically sit them like this. And I rinse, and just put them over something so it can catch, you know, the dripping. And wait for them to sprout. So the next day after this, which is 48 hours, you will start to see some little sprouts. Now everything won't sprout at the same time. You can work it out to where you use everything that sprouts around the same time. But you'll notice some are sprouting before the other sprouts, and you know, the first sprouts that sprout first will have longer little tails than the rest of them. So after 48 hours, once they start growing tails, you can feed them to your birds. Or you can wait another day. The tails will just get longer, but they're more nutritious as soon as the tail starts to grow. And you know, if some of the tails haven't grown, they will eventually. They keep growing and growing. And once they've grown, all of them have sprouted. You can put them in your fridge. I store my sprouts in an airtight container. I just make sure that it's airtight. You can tell if it's airtight by this little like rubber seal around here, because when you close it up, you really want it, you know, tight so they stay fresh. And what I do also is I put paper towel on the bottom so it can soak up any moisture, as you don't want them, you know, sitting in moisture in your fridge for a few days, and you know, they'll get ruined or full of mold. So this will just soak up any moisture that's left. And what I do when I store my sprouts is I don't store them when they're just freshly washed, like when they're really wet. I will wash them, you know, first thing in the morning and kind of let them almost dry out, not totally. And then I will put them in here because you don't want to store like really wet sprouts. Yeah, that's not too wet. This is okay. Anyway, to give you the idea. And so the paper towel will soak up any wetness. And then I just, you know, close it up tightly. This is a nice container like that, and it'll go in my fridge and last until the birds eat it, up to 5 days. But generally I like to make enough that they eat it in a few days, just so I can make a fresh batch, because they really like it fresh more than, you know, sitting in the fridge for days.